Hi everyone, it is 1 o'clock on the dot, so we are going to go ahead and get started with this webinar. My name is Rebecca. I want to thank you for being here this afternoon to listen to me chit-chat about the application process for optometry school. I hope to give you all sorts of great information and tips, and as you look ahead to this upcoming cycle, or maybe a future cycle in which you're going to apply to optometry school, hopefully this information will assist you along the way. So again, my name is Rebecca. I am the Student Services and Admissions Officer here at SCO. And if you've tuned into one of these presentations before, I'm the one that usually helps to coordinate them, but oftentimes I'll have a guest speaker. Today I'm going to do all of the talking myself, but I would like to make it interactive, so feel free along the way today to go ahead and chime in with your questions. There's a couple different ways you can do that in the system, either by using the question and answer box or the chat box. So I'll keep an eye on both. If I'm not able to get to your question right away during the presentation portion, I'll open it up for questions and make sure to circle back to anything that's unanswered at the end of the session today. So once again, thanks for being here with me this afternoon. Let's go ahead and jump into things. So first of all, I want to send a quick reminder out there about the upcoming optometry virtual fair that will be hosted by ASCO, which is the Association for Schools and Colleges of Optometry, a really great and helpful organization, especially for prospective students like yourselves who might be trying to figure out more about the field and learn about the application process in general and get to know what options are out there in terms of optometry schools. They have a lot of really great resources on their website. They're also hosting this virtual fair, so they've invited representatives from all 23 schools and colleges of optometry across the U.S. to come together on this day, June 11th, next Tuesday, to sit in a virtual chat room environment and really respond to whatever questions anyone who joins the chat room, prospective student-wise, throw out to them. So if you have questions and you want to be able to throw your questions out to many different schools you're considering in a single day, this is a great thing to sign up for. Even if you don't have your own questions, you might benefit by reading the transcript of conversation and questions asked by other students and responded to by the school. So it's a really great thing. You can pop in and out anytime during the day, although the schools will have different times established for their chat room. So I'll be representing SCO next Tuesday during this fair, and I have a couple different windows of time that I'll be chatting during our normal work hours. So I've given you the link there to go ahead and register for this event. Hope that you consider it. We'll also have a couple of webinar sessions for the rest of the summer. In July, we're going to do something new and have a virtual tour of our campus and the Eye Center. I hope to have some guests help me talk about how our campus is set up and show some pictures and go through our virtual tour environment on that day. So it should be pretty fun. And then in August, the ever popular session we do about interview skills, especially for those of you who are getting ready to apply in this cycle. This is a really great session to attend in August. It is my co-presenter for that session is Mr. Joe Hauser, who's our VP for Student Services. He's going to give you insight as to what our interview process is at SCO, what the day looks like, and give you all sorts of great information about what you can do to get ready for that day and how you can prepare to present your best self during your interview. So good one to attend. All right, but today for the next 45 minutes or so, we are going to spend time talking about the nitty-gritty details of the application process. The details remain relatively unchanged from cycle to cycle, but the specifics I'm going to talk to or focus on today will be especially relevant for those of you going through the process in this upcoming year, though should remain relevant as you move forward if any of you are looking to apply in later cycles. For this particular upcoming cycle, it will open in terms of the application itself. The system will open on June 27th. It's typically around July 1 every year. And at SCO, we do a rolling admissions process. So we start reviewing applications as soon as they come through the system and into or on our desk. And we will consider applicants right away and start interviewing and issuing those interview invitations as early as August. We continue to review applications, to invite for interview, and accept students until we fill our class. We have a class size of about 136 that we enter every year. So we continue to accept students to build toward that 136 enrollment until the end of the cycle, which is March 1. So March 1 is the very last day that you can submit your application, the very last day that you can take your OAT. There is always a chance that we fill our class before March 1st. We tend to interview still until that day or slightly beyond because we like to build a wait list, as we do have some attrition after we enroll students. Some choose to come here, some choose to go elsewhere. So we continue to build and interview and build that wait list even after we fill our class. But all that is to say is, with the rolling admissions process, it's great to get started as soon as you can in the earlier parts of the application cycle. I'm sorry, I'm pausing here because I see someone asking about the audio. The audio is on, but I can't hear anyone else talking. I'm seeing that my microphone is on and it looks like it's coming through. Can someone else raise their hand to say that they can hear me okay? Would appreciate it. Okay, thanks. It sounds like I am on and live, so I'm sorry if you can't hear me. Maybe check your speaker system, but I will be recording this session as we go. So if you can't figure out the technical side of things, I'll post this to the YouTube page, and hopefully we can figure it out after the fact for you to listen to this session again. Sorry about that. Okay, so rolling admission, we always advise you to apply in the earlier parts of the cycle so that you avoid any kind of risk in terms of our class filling by the end. We are not the only school that does rolling admission. In fact, the majority of optometry schools do handle their process that way, not 100%, but many, the large majority do. So it's always good to know what the situation is for the top schools that you're considering. So June 27th, that is when the application opens. But what can you do to get ready for that date? There is actually plenty. I'm going to go through these points in a little bit more detail as the basis of the presentation today. But just really quickly, you want to be thinking about what schools you're going to apply to. And the way to figure that out is really by doing some research. There are some obvious things you want to consider when you're choosing your top optometry schools, such as location and cost. But you really want to be finding the right program for you. You want to be exposing yourself to the field of optometry. We like to see students who have shadowed or worked within the field so that you know what you're getting yourself into. You know enough about what optometrists do on a day-to-day basis to commit to the intensive academic experience that is optometry school. So we don't want you to jump into optometry school blindly without having a general basis of knowledge of what optometrists do day in and day out. Academically, the optometry admissions test is hopefully something you've all heard about. And we do need to have an OAT score for your application to be considered complete. You do not need to wait until the application cycle opens or wait until June 27th to take the OAT. You can take that test now, anytime leading up to the application cycle, all the way through March 1st in our case. Prerequisite courses, hopefully you're familiar and you're working toward completion of those prereqs. You don't need to have them 100% complete by the time that you submit your application, but you need to have plans to complete them by the time that you enroll. You can start thinking about who you want to serve as your reference, and even though they're not technically able to submit your letter of recommendation and your reference into the application system right now, they can only do so once the application portal opens. They can be preparing letters, and you can at least make contact with them to say, hey, I'm getting ready to apply to optometry school. Would you be willing to serve as my reference? The application will open at the end of the month, and I'll reach out with more details then. Your transcripts and all your other academic and extracurricular experiences, all that information will need to go in your application, so it doesn't hurt to start gathering that information now. let's go into some of these things in more detail. So I mentioned thinking ahead about what optometry schools are on your short list. So it's very wise to have, of course, a top choice, but have some backup options. And how do you choose what's right for you? Like I said, some more of the obvious reasons that lead students to certain optometry schools over others. Location, do you want to be close to family? Do you have a partner somewhere that you want to be close to? Do you want to be in a certain geographic region? Do you want to be in a certain state? Do you want to experience a new part of the country? Cost differences that go into where you live. Do you want to live in a big city? Or more of a suburban or rural environment? What's the cost difference with that? Cost differences in terms of in-state, out-of-state tuition. But I encourage you to really expand your thought process beyond some of those more obvious considerations. So you really want to consider what program is going to prepare you to be the best doctor that you want to be. So if you really want to be able to do service to your community, you want to be able to do international service work as a doctor, maybe you think about a program that introduces you to that kind of experience as a student. So you really want to be a researcher, work for one of the optometry companies or work in a university environment doing research. Maybe you want to find a school that has really great resources for research and research opportunities. Do you want to be part of a large institution where there are other students studying other topics, where there's a football team, sports teams, where you're living in a university city, or do you want to get away from that? Do you want a different experience than what you had in undergrad? And how are the schools you're considering doing in terms of preparing their students to be successful as doctors? So you want to look at all of the statistics. You want to know about enrollment rates, graduation rates. How well are schools doing at getting their students from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4? Are they losing students along the way? Or are they able to retain those students, to work with any students that might be struggling to get them to that end goal? Board passage rates, you probably know that optometrists or optometry students have to take national boards before they're eligible to get licensed to practice. And each school will have their statistics of their board passage rates published somewhere. SEO actually has had 100% ultimate board passage rate for the last couple of years, so we're pretty proud of that. So think about all of these things, and maybe you have other reasons, but certainly something you want to reflect on. If you can make it out to some of your top choice programs for a visit, I think that's a really, really excellent way to confirm that the environment that is offered at that program is going to work for you, that you feel comfortable in that school. You can learn more about their program, talk to students, talk to faculty, see the facilities, see the technologies, maybe even see what the patient base looks like in the clinical environment when you go out and take a visit. We certainly try to introduce you to all of those dynamics, and we would welcome you to come and visit us here in Memphis. Just give me a call or shoot me an email anytime. We would set you up to go on a tour, and that tour would be led by one of our current students, and then you'd also get the chance to have a counseling session with an admissions officer. We can take a look at your transcripts, talk about your experience, and really go over how competitive you would be as an applicant as you look to take on that application process. And of course, we encourage you to ask questions. So any questions you have, you can find our contact information in 100 different places, including right here on the slide, but of course on our website as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. If you want to get to know us a little bit better, if you have specific questions, make sure to contact one of our admissions officers. All right, so I mentioned exposing yourself to the field so that you have an understanding of what an optometrist does on a daily basis. What we want to see specifically, what we encourage you to work for, is at least 30 to 45 hours of shadowing. That's going to give you what we consider to be a baseline level of knowledge of the practice of optometry. But as you might know, if you've done some shadowing or logically speaking, not every optometrist is going to practice or handle their practice in the same way. So we encourage you to get out there and see multiple different practices. Start with your own optometrist, see if he or she can recommend you to someone else, and go from there. So we like to see at least 2 or 3 different settings. And it's even better if you can see different modes of practice. So you might be familiar with a private practice. Maybe the optometrist owns the practice. Maybe it's a partnership or a small group practice, but owned by the optometrist themselves. That's one type of practice. There are commercial type practices like lens crafters, institutional settings like our eye center here at SCO, like VAs, hospitals, children's hospitals. There are centers where there are ODs, doctors of optometry, and MD ophthalmologists working together to care for the same patient. So the more you can go and see, the more you see the breadth of the field and what's available to you once you graduate and start practicing yourself. So 30 to 45 hours at a minimum. If you think about what a minimum passing grade is in an academic sense, that's not obviously as good as you can do. So we always say no amount is too much. Get out there and shadow as much as you can. Don't stress about having 1,000 hours, certainly, but the more you can get, the better. And that's also going to prepare you for the interview, because part of the interview is we give you the chance to express why you're interested in optometry and what you know about the field. And so your experience is shadowing, talking with optometrists is really going to help contribute to that knowledge and understanding. All right, I'm seeing a couple questions about shadowing. So can shadowing ophthalmologists along with optometrists be okay too? So yes, we do consider that kind of experience in a co-management type center as shadowing, certainly a good experience. And what type of practice is one that is part of a university and sees a lot of students and staff? It depends. Not every type of practice fits cleanly into one model over the other. That sounds more like an institution. And you don't need to check boxes. You don't need to check the box that I've shadowed at a private practice, at a VA, at a commercial practice, but just be able to speak to some variety of the shadowing experiences that you've seen. All right, and then a couple other questions. Shadowing at a lens crafter's facility, it definitely does. That's one of those commercial type practices. And then work experience is also very valuable. It definitely counts in our mind toward that exposure. It's great experience and can really build that knowledge base. But we always say, even if you worked many hours in one practice, still try and get out and shadow another practice or two to get that variety in there. So even half a day or one day at another practice, if you've already worked for a number of hours in a different type of setting, can be valuable. So yes, work experience is wonderful. Save up some of that cash for when you become an optometry student, but make sure you still get some of that variety in there. All right, so in addition to your exposure to the field, obviously academic credentials are another really important factor when it comes to admission to optometry school. And so what I have here is information about our incoming classes for the last, I think, 10 years. When we as an admissions office look at a student's application in terms of the academic portion of the file, we're looking at a few different factors. You're probably familiar with the OAT. The GPA and OAT are two really big metrics that we're going to look at, but we're not going to boil you down to just those two numbers. So we will look at your transcript overall. We will look at how you've progressed from your freshman year to your sophomore year to your junior year. We're going to calculate a prerequisite course GPA, so averaging the grades from all of your prerequisite courses that you've taken. So we want to see how you are well-rounded as a student. We're not going to just look at your GPA and OAT alone and go from there. But it does help us to talk in terms of GPA and OAT to give you some general knowledge as to what we consider to be a competitive applicant. So generally speaking, for the last several years, you can even see it right here on the screen, our average entering credentials have been around a 3.5 GPA and a 330 OAT. And we're edging a little bit higher than that for this incoming fall 2019 class, but generally speaking, that's where we land with our averages. So if you want to have a goal to work toward, it would be to hit these marks, 3.5 GPA, 330 OAT. But what might be more illuminating for you is to talk a little bit about our range. So not every student coming in is going to have 3.5 GPA and 330 OAT. With averages, obviously, you're going to have students below and students above that. So in terms of a range, generally, we encourage you to reach at least a 3.0 with your GPA. And we like to see that with not only your cumulative GPA, but your prerequisite GPA as well, just showing that you can keep up that same GPA with your prerequisite courses, especially as you're getting into those upper level science classes and classes that are particularly relevant for optometry school. 3.0 is kind of the baseline minimum competitive GPA. It's not a hard minimum, so we do look at students who have slightly below a 3.0, but in that case, we would want to see a slightly above average OAT as a way for that candidate to demonstrate their academic competitiveness. So it's to some degree a sliding scale. If your OAT is a little bit below average, but your GPA is a little bit above average, you still might be in a good place and vice versa. So 3.0 GPA. With your OAT, we really like to see a 320 or above, not only with the average score that you're given, but you do get a sub-score in the different sections of the test. So you get a total science score, you get a score for general biology, general chemistry, etc. So we like to see consistent scores in the 300, ideally 320 or above. When you get into the 300 academic average or 310 academic average, again, we're going to want to see a slightly above average GPA. So 300 is really the bottom of the range of competitive scores when it comes to OAT. But it all depends on the strength of the rest of your file. So we're always happy to take a look at your transcript, and we will take a look at your transcript as you go through the application process to get a better sense of how you've progressed along the way. If you have strengths and weaknesses in certain areas, if you compensate in other ways. And so hopefully that gives you a baseline to go off of in terms of academic credentials. But we will advise you. So when you submit your application, we do give you feedback to say, okay, your GPA is strong, your OAT score is a little bit below where we would like you to be, so we would encourage you to retake that test. If you submit your application and your credentials are not quite strong enough to warrant an interview invitation right away, we're not going to turn you away at that moment. We're going to give you the opportunity to do what you need to do to improve on whatever weakness we have identified, and you get basically until the end of the application cycle to go back and do whatever it is that we recommend to improve. And so you just need to keep us posted. If you retake the OAT, let us know what your updated score is. If it's something that's non-academic, maybe we want to see a little bit more shadowing, go out and do that shadowing and let us know once you've completed it, and then we would reconsider you at that point in time for an interview invitation. All right, I see a question about GPA overall or just science. We do look at your cumulative GPA. We also calculate a prerequisite GPA, so not specifically science, but it's going to include all of those courses that we require as prerequisite courses, and you'll see that list in just a moment. Well, here it is right now. So these are the prerequisite courses, and they're pretty par for the course when it comes to optometry school. Nothing too different from other schools as far as I understand. We require some non-sciences, so we do like to see a couple semesters of English. We want to know that you can communicate, psychology, social science, 2 semesters, statistics and calculus would be the other non-hard science classes, I suppose, and then we have all of the sciences listed here as well. And I apologize, I don't know why English is listed twice, but it is just 2 semesters over 1 year of English. that is required. So again, I mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation, but just note that you don't need to have these all complete by the time that you submit your application. You need to have plans to complete the classes before, the day that you start the program here in optometry school. So oftentimes we see students applying that have yet to finish microbiology or biochemistry. Those are pretty common. We only require that you have 90 credit hours. A bachelor's degree is going to make you more competitive, but of course you need these classes as well. We accept AP credits. I'm trying to think of some of the common questions we get. AP credit we do accept as long as it's listed on your undergraduate transcript. If it's not listed on your transcript, you just need some sort of a proof of your test scores or whatnot. If you have questions about certain prerequisite courses, you're not so sure if the classes you took would count towards social science, that one's kind of broad, just reach out and let me know. We go into a little bit more detail on our website about what we consider to be social science and what we would accept for English. So take a look at our website, but if you have questions beyond a little bit more of the explanation there, then reach out to me. All right, moving on to reference letters. I mentioned before, it doesn't hurt to start thinking about who you'll reach out to request reference letters, and you can go ahead and ask them ahead of time as well, so that they're prepared when the application cycle opens to submit those letters for you. You want to give your recommenders adequate time. You don't want to demand that they submit the letter, in just a couple of days. I would suggest giving them, a couple weeks turnaround. So plan that into your timeline. We require two, so one from an optometrist, a non-relative optometrist that you've shadowed or worked for, and one from either a pre-health advisor or an advisory committee or one of your natural science professors, so a biochem or physics professor. We only require 2 letters. Other schools might require more. The system, the application itself allows you to submit up to 4. We will look at every recommendation that is in the system, but it doesn't really add an extreme amount more of value by having more than those 2 required letters. So again, we will look at all of the letters, but we're really looking for the 2. You will request your references through the OptomCAS system, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So in OptomCAS, you will submit the information for the people you are using as your reference. Those people will get instructions via email for logging into OptomCAS. They will upload a letter and fill out a couple questions. So they can go ahead and get started on those letters right away. It's just a standard recommendation letter, and they have to write it on their own letterhead. And then when they have access to OptomCAS, they'll be ready to upload it right away. And then you'll be good to go. So that is reference letters. We'll move on to the essay question portion. This is something that you will also submit in OptomCAS. This is specific to SCO. So each school might have a slightly different variation on their essay question or different standards in general. Ours is pretty much a personal statement. We want to know why you're interested in optometry. Really anecdotes about what led you to this field. We know a little bit about you through your transcripts and what you've put in your application, so just think beyond what we can already tell about you from your extracurricular experiences and whatnot, and give us your story as to what led you to optometry. This is not something that I want you to really stress about. But it is important that you spend some time, make sure you proofread your essays, and in fact I'd encourage you to have a friend proofread your essays, because nothing turns off an admissions committee like typos in an essay. So it's not something to stress about, but make sure you pay attention to it and submit a polished story in the end. All right, so let's take a look at the application itself. OptomCAS is the centralized application system, Optometry, CAS, centralized application system that all schools of optometry basically subscribe to across the US. So in OptomCAS is where you will submit the bulk of your application materials. In OptomCAS, you will have those letters of recommendation. You're going to type in every academic course that you've taken as an undergraduate or graduate student, line by line, class by class, grade by grade. So it helps to have your unofficial or official academic transcript on your desk as you're getting ready to type all that information in. You will submit your shadowing experiences and any other kind of extracurricular experiences into OptomCAS, and then you'll designate which schools you want to essentially apply to in the system, and those schools will have access to your information. Many, if not all, most of the schools, SCO included, will have some other sort of school-specific application. Some of them are built into OptomCAS. Some of them exist outside of that system. So ours exists on our website. We call it the SCO Supplemental Application. You can access it through sco.edu/apply, and it is a quick form that you fill out where we basically are able to collect some basic demographics about you, get you processed into our system sooner than what it would take you to ultimately complete and submit OptomCAS. So this is what OptomCAS looks like. When you log in, you're not able to get access to this until June 27th this year. But when you ultimately do, you'll basically create a profile. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that type of experience. And you can log in and log out. You don't need to complete this all in one setting. And there's different sections. So personal information, as you can imagine, it would be basic demographic information. Your academic history, again, is where you're going to go line by line. Supporting information would be your experiences, your recommendation letters, and then program materials would be anything that's school specific. So in SCO's case, under program materials is where you're going to submit your response to that essay question. So we just went through each of these sections. A couple notes about OptomCAS. OptomCAS does have a transcript processing service that you can opt into and pay for. Basically what that offers is if you don't want to type every single class you've taken into OptomCAS, you can pay them to do it for you. We always recommend not to use their transcripting service because you don't know how long it's going to take them to do that. It's not in your control. And you know, it's I think simpler and more expedient for you to just type all that information in yourself. You have more control over when all that processing takes place, and you save a little bit of cash. It does cost to submit an OptomCAS application. $180 includes one school, and then you do have to pay $70 for each additional school that you choose. With OptomCAS, one more note about the academic and the transcript processing. What happens is you, again, are going to type in all of your academic coursework taken, and then you actually do have to send OptomCAS your official transcripts, and they're going to do an audit process. So they're going to double check that everything you submitted into OptomCAS, so everything you typed in matches what's on your official transcript. Once they do that audit, they basically call your file verified, and only when you're verified are the optometry schools able to invite you for an interview. None of us can invite you until we see that verification come through, and that process can take anywhere from 2 days up to 2 or 3 weeks, depending on whatever OptomCAS load is at that point in time. So I wouldn't dawdle on submitting your official transcripts to OptomCAS because that verification is really important. So don't wait until the very bitter end to submit your transcripts. It might be best to do that as one of the first things you do, submitting those to OptomCAS. Okay, that's OptomCAS in a nutshell. I'm going to, at the end, check and see whatever questions you have about the system and respond then. The supplemental application, as I mentioned, is a quick form on our website. We collect your basic demographic information. We open the supplemental application also on June 27th. You just need your OptomCAS ID. So you do need to go and start that profile on OptomCAS so you can get that ID and put that into your supplemental application on SCO's website. That's how we link your supplemental application to OptomCAS, and it's how we get you into our system. So you don't need to finish OptomCAS in order to submit the supplemental application. In fact, I encourage you to submit the supplemental once you have your OptomCAS ID. So again, you're not delaying any kind of processing. And we can also reach out to you and start advising you as soon as we receive that supplemental. So we do ask if you have taken the OAT, we'll ask for your score, we'll ask for your GPA. So we can give you some really cursory feedback based on that supplemental application alone before everything in OptomCAS processes. So I encourage students to submit that supplemental as soon as they can. And we do have a $50 application fee that you will pay on our website. And in terms of the cycle, the steps that you go through as a candidate, you'll submit that application and all that entails, as we've discussed. So OptomCAS has to verify your academic information. We have to process your supplemental application. Supporting documents are received in terms of your letters of recommendation, your transcripts are processed by OptomCAS, and we will evaluate your file, your application. So we're going to look over your transcripts, look at your OAT score, read your letters of recommendation, et cetera, et cetera. And if you are deemed to be a competitive applicant, deserving of an interview, we will issue that interview invitation right away. We issue our interview invitations via email, and we start doing that as soon as the first verified files start coming through. We do a half-day interview program on campus. They are conducted on Fridays throughout the cycle. In the first couple months, so August, September, October, we also interview on Mondays. So you do get some opportunity to choose the day that you want to come to the interview, but sometimes they fill, so flexibility can be really helpful. You come to interview, it is a one-on-one interview with a faculty member. It is closed file, so they don't know anything about your credentials with the exception of your name and what state you're from. That way we prevent any kind of bias for any kind of reason, and you get to express and demonstrate who you are as a candidate, why you're interested in SCO, why you're interested in optometry, and really open that up for the faculty member right then and there. You'll go through a counseling session with an admissions officer where we do go through your file and ask you any questions, talk about anything that we need to, give you a little bit of information. Once you come through the interview, we usually are able to let you know if you've been accepted within a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, and we give you time to think things over, to finish other interviews, and really reflect on your choice before we ask you to commit to coming to SCO. So we let you know in about 2 weeks, and then depending on when you're coming through the process, that dictates the amount of time you get to think things over. So if you're coming in the early parts of the application cycle before November 1st, we give you a full 8 weeks. We really don't want to pressure you to make a decision sooner than when you're ready. We understand that there are a lot of factors going into it, that you want to consider your top options. We want you to have the chance to go and interview elsewhere and really get a feel for where you think you're best fit. So we try not to push you too quickly into a decision. That's why we give you as much time as we can. And then after you submit your application, it's important to keep in touch with us. After you go through the interview, it's important to keep in touch with us, responding to any kind of emails or phone calls that you receive. If we've asked you to go out and do something to improve your candidacy, make sure you continue to update us on those experiences. If you're doing more shadowing, if you're retaking the OAT, if you finish some academic courses, we try to go back and revisit applications that we've reviewed once before as frequently as we can, but in the heat of the application cycle, we're not able to do that on a daily basis. So it really can make a difference if you keep in touch with us and be proactive about letting us know if you've made any kind of changes or improvements, or you've done anything further to enhance your application. Continue to research the profession. It's always great to talk to optometrists, understand what's going on in the field, to ready yourself for it yourself. So following through is important. I'm going to really briefly touch on a couple things. So contract seats, if you have researched at all or looked on our website about tuition, you might have stumbled upon this term, contract seat. SCO is a private school. We don't have your traditional in-state, out-of-state tuition, but we do have relationships with a couple of the, or several of the states in our area. You can see the list there, and these are states that have stipulated money or will be offering money to SEO students from these states to subsidize their tuition. So it can be pretty substantial in some cases, and basically we call any student who is chosen to receive this funding a contract seat recipient. We unfortunately don't get enough money from many of these states to offer subsidized tuition to every single applicant that's accepted from these states. So in some cases, the contract seats are competitive, not in every case, but Arkansas has been competitive lately, Georgia has been competitive. So we award these in a merit-based sort of sense and also on a rolling basis. So we're going to select the first 5 or 6 strong candidates from Georgia to receive those available contract seats. You have to be a resident of that state. The residency guidelines are not determined by SEO. We go based on the states themselves and how they consider their residents. And it's up to the state to certify and verify that the student is indeed a resident of that state. So I know that's a little complicated and different than what I experienced as an undergrad with in-state tuition. So if you have questions about that, if you're from one of those 9 states, reach out and we can go into more detail. We do also have a very competitive scholarship program for incoming students. We have a pretty big endowment. We award over 50 scholarships to each entering class, and we prioritize non-contract seat recipients. So if you're not eligible for a contract seat, you're going to be prioritized for a scholarship, and those range anywhere from $1,000 to $20,000 per student, and they are renewable. So if you're selected for a $10,000 scholarship, you get that every year, so long as you maintain the required GPA. These are merit-based awards, so we're looking at the same kinds of things that we look at for admission, but in some cases, based on maybe the donor and what they wanted to establish as requirements for the scholarship, they might want us to select students who have had leadership experience or are from a certain state. So in some cases, there are further stipulations, but otherwise, we're looking for strong academic students who have been engaged in the field and who perform well during the interview. And so let's boil it all down into a few tips as I try to conclude and then go to your questions. So number one is apply early. I cannot say that enough. You want to get through our door before we get too far along, before we start filling our seats, before we start exhausting scholarship and contract seat funds. It also gives you the opportunity, if you come through and there's a certain aspect of your application we want you to improve, you have plenty of time to go back and do that. Something about the OAT I didn't mention before is if you need to retake the OAT to boost your chances of admission or to boost your chances of getting a scholarship, you're not eligible to take the OAT for a second time until you've waited 90 days. So taking the OAT early also gives you plenty of time to take it again if you need to. Connect with other optometry students, schools, ask questions. Talking with students at each school can be a really great way to get to know the culture a little bit better. So don't be shy. If you want it to be connected with SCO students maybe from your home state or who share a similar something similar with yourself, just reach out and I'd be happy to put you in touch with any number of students. You want to make sure you're preparing well for the OAT. We talked about what we're looking for. It's important that you really take that seriously because it is a really big factor for your competitiveness. And make sure you are interacting with the admissions office, with students, and anyone you engage with in a professional sort of way. We are a professional school. Optometry is a profession. We want students who are going to represent the profession, represent our school well. We're going to go out there and serve their community well. So make sure you demonstrate those skills early on and consistently throughout the process. Demonstrate knowledge of the school. I want you to come to the interview prepared with questions about SCO, with knowledge of SCO and what we're looking for and what we represent as an institution. So make sure you do your research ahead of time and make sure to ask questions. And don't be shy, reach out anytime. We'd be happy to connect and answer those for you. All right, so that is the end of the slides here. I'm going to turn to the questions. I know we had quite a few come through, so let's see what we have here. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we had some questions come through about shadowing. Does working at 2 different optometry offices count, one private and one commercial? Yes, that would definitely be different experiences. And again, like I said, you don't really need to check the boxes to say, oh, I've shadowed at each of these specific types of places. Just make sure that you have some variety within your shadowing or work experiences. Okay, AP credits as prerequisite courses that is accepted, as is IB credits. You need to demonstrate that credit in some way, ideally by having that show up on your undergraduate transcript. But if it's not on your undergraduate transcript, give us a call or shoot us an email. We can go through that with you. Okay, I have a question about statistics. Can biostatistics count toward that requirement? Yes, we don't really care within which department your statistics course was taken. So it could be business statistics. We really don't care because the concepts you learn and process you learn for analyzing data is fairly the same. So yes, biostatistics does count. What ranges of scores and GPAs make you eligible for scholarships? That's a great question. So our scholarships, contract seats, etc., are merit-based. So we are looking at your academic credentials, and as you might assume, the standards are a little bit higher for scholarship recipients. So it's hard to give you a specific range, but I would say anything above average, so above a 3.5 GPA and above a 330 OAT is really going to get you in the ballpark for a scholarship. So again, there are going to be students who have really, really strong OAT and maybe their GPA is a little bit below average, but that strong OAT is enough to get them in the realm for scholarship possibilities. So generally speaking, anything above those averages, but it all depends on the student's specific circumstance. I think our averages for scholarship students specifically are around a 3.7, 3.8 GPA, around a 340, 350 OAT, but it depends on the scholarship as well. Question about the personal statement. So how can you make your personal statement stand out without sounding generic? Well, I would suggest that you might not know all of the students' stories that have led, your peers. If you're in pre-optometry club, if you know other students, you don't really know what their motivation is for optometry school. So just use your own story. It really doesn't matter if your story is the same or different than others. We want to know genuinely what has led you down this path. So it's one of those things where we're not looking for, a beautiful, eloquent English major sort of essay. We just want to get to know you on a personal level a little bit more. The essay is short and brief, so it's really when you come for your interview that we're getting to know you a little bit more. The interview is a far more important part of that process. So we're screening for red flags in the essay. We're looking for any points of concern. Otherwise, we just want to hear your anecdote and what has led you down this path. So I would say don't worry about sounding generic. All right, the next question, what date is OptomCAS open? June 27th. A question about the supplemental application. The supplemental application does not include an essay. So it is really brief demographic information about you. We ask if you have any optometrists in your family, but it is brief. You do not need to, there's really not an essay or anything more than that to prepare ahead of time. Good question though. Question about OptomCAS and when you register, should you use your university email or personal email? It really is up to you. So whichever you check more frequently, I suggest. It really doesn't matter to us, and in fact, we don't oftentimes care or really notice whether your email address is from your school or your personal. We will send your interview invitation to whichever email address you register, so you just want to make sure you're checking that email on a daily basis. Okay, a question about the OAT. Does it look bad if we take the OAT twice? We accept about, I think, 25% of our incoming class more or less has taken the OAT more than once. So it is not something you should really fear having to take it again, but it is a time-consuming process to get ready for the OAT. It is an expensive test, so we don't want you to blow off your first attempt. We don't want you to really approach it as a first attempt is a chance to get to know what the test is like. That's what practice tests are for. So do try to make your first attempt the strongest, attempt possible. Do what you got to do. But if you have to take it a second time, that's not a point of major concern for us. Like I said, about 1 in every 4 students that we accept have taken it more than once. A question about calculus. Is life science calculus okay to take? I would think yes, as long as it's a dedicated calculus course. We don't want the calculus course to include other topics of math so that the calculus portion of it is a little bit more diluted. We don't want pre-calculus, but kind of same with biostatistics. We will accept calculus in any kind of department so long as it's a dedicated calculus course. So a question about transcripts. You cannot submit your transcripts to OptomCAS before the application portal opens. So I would say you don't want to wait too much longer than when it opens. Don't dawdle in submitting your transcripts as you're working on your application, but no, you cannot submit your transcripts to OptomCAS until you have logged in and worked on that application. Question about OptomCAS again. Can you start entering information into the system before June 27th? Unfortunately, you cannot. So June 27th is the day it opens, and that's the day you can start putting information in the system. Question about prerequisites in terms of English. What kind of courses satisfy the English prereq? Generally, any kind of literature, any kind of writing courses. We do accept writing intensive courses so long as it is indicated as such on the course description or transcript. It has to satisfy a writing intensive sort of requirement. Otherwise, we're looking for literature, writing, composition, those kinds of courses. Okay, here's a question about the application and the OAT. Will you look at our application only after we have the official OAT score report? That's a really good question. So we will actually look at your application as soon as it's submitted, regardless of whether the OAT is there, whether your recommenders have submitted their letters. So we can give you feedback even if you're submitting the application, say in the early part of July, but don't plan to take the OAT until August 1st, that's no problem. I'd still encourage you to submit your application soon after the portal opens. That way you can get it all taken care of. Everything can be processed, and once you take the OAT, you can send us your unofficial score report. We can take a look at that and then give you a decision on your interview eligibility right away. So something I should have addressed earlier, your OAT does make, you need to have an OAT score for your application to be considered complete, but you can always send us your unofficial score report if you're waiting to take the test until after you submitted the application. We cannot officially invite you for an interview until we do have that OAT score though. All right. Another question about prerequisite courses, biochem and organic. Doesn't matter if it's biochem or organic chemistry 1 or 2. So for chemistry, we do require general chemistry 1 and general chemistry 2. For biochemistry, just a single biochemistry course, and same for organic chemistry. So it doesn't really matter if it's level 1 or level 2. I don't get that question often because generally students have to take one before they take two, but if for some reason you've taken organic chemistry 2 and in that organic chemistry 1, I'm sure that we would accept that. But any kind of specific unique questions you have about your circumstances, don't be afraid to reach out. Okay, any other questions out there? These are good questions, guys. I know some of them are a little specific, but hopefully helpful to the greater audience. I hope that you consider joining us at the ESCO Virtual Fair next Tuesday. And any questions you have along the way, don't hesitate to reach out. I have my email address there and our general email address as well. And good luck. Best of luck to you all. So any last minute questions? Going once? Going twice? All right, guys. Well, take care and hope to talk to you soon.